My name is Dana Miller. I am 34 years old. I work as an environmental engineer, and I live in Omaha. One Sunday that should have been quiet and ordinary turned into the night my whole life tilted. We were all squeezed around my parents' dining table: mom, dad, my brother, and his wife. The roast sat in the middle, still steaming, but nobody reached for it. Dad leaned forward with a face like stone and said, in a voice that felt colder than the dishes, "You can stay in the guest room or you can move out." He did not blink. He kept his eyes locked on me like the decision had already been made hours ago. My brother jumped in right away, eager like he had been waiting to say it. "Honestly, it would be better if you were gone by tomorrow." He sounded almost happy. My fork slipped and clattered against the plate. For years I had carried most of the costs in that house: electric bills, repairs, and even that shiny new refrigerator everyone liked to brag about. Yet suddenly I was being handled like dead weight that needed to be pushed out of the way. My brother's wife watched me with a little smirk, the kind people wear when they think they have won a prize. I tried to speak up. My voice shook, but I listed out the money I had poured into that home, every bill, every repair. Dad waved me off like I was a fly near his glass. "It is decided." Mom stared at her plate and would not look at me. The silence from her chair hurt more than Dad's words. Anger rushed through me so fast my hands felt hot. I stood, grabbed my keys, and said, "Fine. I am leaving." That same night I packed everything that was mine: my television, the couch I paid for, even the coffee maker I used every morning, and I walked out of the place I used to call home. A week later, right when I had started to feel steady again, my phone buzzed. It was Mom. Her voice was tight and thin. When I answered, I could hear my brother yelling in the background, frantic and breaking. "She is lying. Mom say she is lying." The chaos poured through the speaker and into my new quiet space. I did not know it then, but what came next would flip their world upside down. Before I go further, I want to know something simple from you. What time is it where you are, and which city are you in? I am curious how far this story travels and who is listening. Years earlier, I had moved back into my parents' house in Omaha to help keep the roof over all of our heads. After my grandmother passed away, the bills piled up. Mortgage, utilities, even the leaky roof Dad kept promising to fix. I took it on myself to cover most of it. I am an environmental engineer, so I used my paycheck to pay for new windows, a water heater, and the basic things that kept the lights on. I worked long weeks, 60 hours sometimes, running from job sites to late-night reports. Still, it never felt like enough. Dad would nod when I handed him receipts, but his attention always drifted back to my brother, Ryan. Ryan had a gift for failing upward. He burned through one business idea after another: food trucks, a cryptocurrency app, even a sketchy online store that folded after a few months. Every time he came back with a fresh pitch, and Dad lit up like Christmas morning, praising his vision. Meanwhile, what I did barely got a pat on the back. One time I heard Mom whisper to Dad in the kitchen, "She is just here to help Frank. Ryan is the one with big dreams." Her words stung. I felt less like a daughter and more like a tenant who paid to keep their home afloat. Then Ryan met the woman he would marry. He brought her to dinner one night, all charm, and introduced her as a real estate agent. She had a bright, polished smile and heels that ticked across the floor like a clock. Mom and Dad could not stop gushing about how put together she seemed and how driven she was. I watched her pull up in a sleek black sport utility vehicle with a watch on her wrist that practically shouted money. It did not add up. Real estate in Omaha could be good, but not usually that good, not at her age, barely 30. She laughed too loudly at Dad's jokes, flipping her hair while Ryan beamed like he had struck gold. I asked her a few normal questions about her clients and properties. She slipped away from each one and changed the subject to some vague big deal about to close. Little things kept catching my eye. She would swing by with shopping bags from stores I could not afford, even with all my overtime. One afternoon she flashed a brand new phone and called it a business expense. Ryan never asked a single follow-up question. He only bragged about her hustle. Dad clapped him on the back and said, "You picked a good one." I bit my tongue, but the numbers did not make sense. My paycheck was stretched thin to cover the house, and yet she tossed cash around like it grew on the trees out back. I asked Mom once if anyone else thought the lifestyle was a little too shiny. Mom shrugged and said, "She is successful, Dana. Do not be so doubtful." It was not just the money. She steered every conversation like she was always closing a sale. She talked about flipping houses and dropped words like equity and leverage, and Dad's eyes would start to glow. Ryan nodded along to every sentence like a loyal puppy. If I tried to add something, like how I had just paid the property taxes, Dad would cut me off and say, "Let us hear about her next project." I started to feel invisible unless a bill was due. Once I caught her looking at me during dinner with a small, knowing smirk, the kind that says, "I have them wrapped around my finger and you know it." Outside of those moments, the way they treated me hurt. Ryan would take my car without asking and say it was for business. Dad told me I needed to pitch in more around the house, even though I was already paying for most of it. Mom kept her hands busy with dishes or knitting and would not meet my eyes. I began to keep a careful list in my head of every dollar I poured into that place. Over the years, it was hundreds of thousands. I was not just helping, I was carrying everyone. To them, I was the backup plan who would always be there, while Ryan and his wife were the stars of the show. At night, I lay awake in my old bedroom, staring at the ceiling and wondering why my effort never counted for much. I thought about the projects I had turned down at work to stay close. I thought about the weekends I spent fixing pipes instead of having any kind of life. Something about my brother's wife kept nagging at me. Her gloss, her quick answers that sounded perfect but did not say anything, the way every story of hers was just a little too big. I could not shake the feeling that she was playing a larger game, one that might cost us more than my seat at the table. Then came that Sunday. The table was set with Mom's old china, and the smell of pot roast hung in the air. I slid into my usual chair and forced a smile while Dad carved the meat. Mom fussed with the napkins, her hands jittery. The front door suddenly banged open. Ryan came in hauling 2 suitcases, and his wife followed with a designer tote on her shoulder. "We are moving in," Ryan said, dropping the bags with a heavy thud. His wife stood next to him and gave a tight smile. My stomach twisted. This was not a visit. Dad did not even blink. "Dana," he said without looking up from his plate, "you can take the guest room or you can move out." His words were flat, like he had copied them from a script. I froze with my fork in the air. "What?" It scraped out of my throat. Ryan leaned back and smirked. "Come on, Dana. You do not need all that space. We are starting fresh here." His wife scanned the room with quick eyes, like she was already moving furniture around in her head. Heat rose in my chest. Years of resentment bubbled up. "Hold on," I said, sharper than I meant to. "I have been paying for this house. The electric, the repairs, the mortgage. I bought the refrigerator, the water heater, and the paint on these walls. And now you want me to sleep on a fold-out couch?" I turned to Dad, hoping he would at least acknowledge the truth. He sighed. "It is time for you to step back," he said. "Ryan and his wife need the room more. They have plans." Plans. I wanted to shout. Ryan's plans never lasted longer than a season, and I was the one who kept the place running. Ryan leaned forward, smiling wider. "You are not exactly essential here, Dana," he said, almost singing the words. "You are just here." His wife covered a laugh with her manicured hand. I curled my hands into fists under the table, my nails biting into my palms. "Not essential?" I said. "I have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars to keep this roof over your heads. I turned down promotions so I could stay close. I worked weekends to fix leaks. What have you done, Ryan?" My voice cracked, but I did not care. I was done being invisible. Dad slammed his hand down and the glasses rattled. "Enough," he barked. "This is not about you. They are family and they are staying. End of discussion." Mom twisted her napkin and kept her eyes on the table. I stared at her, waiting for anything, a word, a look, but she stayed silent. Ryan's wife leaned into him and whispered something that made him chuckle. The room felt small and tight, like the walls were pressing in. I pushed back my chair and the screech filled the space. "I am not doing this," I said, standing. "If I am not wanted, I am gone." I ran upstairs with my heart pounding, grabbed a duffel bag and shoved in clothes, my laptop and a few books. I unplugged the flat-screen television I had bought last year and hauled the sofa cushions to the door. Ryan followed me and laughed. "You are taking the couch? Really?" I ignored him, carried my things to the car and kept going. Dad stood in the doorway with his arms crossed. "You are making a scene," he said. I did not answer. I loaded the last box, slammed the trunk, and drove away, watching the house shrink in the mirror. I was not just leaving a bedroom. I was done carrying all of them. A few days after I left, I moved into a small apartment in downtown Omaha. The city hummed outside my window, cars, distant voices, a train somewhere far off. It felt different from my parents' house, where the quiet had always felt heavy. Here the quiet felt open, like it belonged to me. My coworker Grace Turner found the listing and sent it to me with 3 exclamation points. It was a little one-bedroom, just enough space for my rescued television, the sofa I had paid for, and a tiny table that wobbled if you pressed too hard. Grace came over that first night with takeout and a roll of tape. She laughed big and easy while we cut open boxes. "You need to get out of your head, Dana," she said, flipping a colorful flyer into my lap. "There is a yoga studio around the corner. It is not just stretching. It is a reset." I was not sure yoga would solve anything, but Grace's certainty pulled me along. The next evening, I walked into class feeling stiff and awkward. I wobbled, I breathed, I tried to focus, and for the first time in weeks, something inside me loosened. When I left, the air felt lighter. Grace's voice stayed with me like a hand on my shoulder. "Start fresh. Keep moving." Even with the new routine, I could not shake the feeling about Sabrina Hayes, my brother's wife. Her shopping bags, her designer purse, that shiny black sport utility vehicle, the picture did not make sense. The math did not add up, no matter how I turned it. I decided I needed real information, not just gut feelings. I called Ben Carter, an old contact from a real estate conference years ago. He picked up on the second ring. "Dana, long time," he said, steady and curious. "What is going on?" I did not dance around it. I asked if he knew anything about Sabrina, told him she said she was a real estate agent, talked big about deals, and lived like the money never stopped. Ben was quiet for a few beats. "Sabrina Hayes," he said. "She has been circling some people's radar. The word is that her agency is being looked at for bad flips, phony appraisals, clients getting scammed, strange fees. Nothing official on paper yet, but she is not clean." My stomach dropped. I thanked him and hung up, staring at my phone like it might explain how to fix any of this. If Sabrina was trouble, my family was standing in the middle of it. I called Dad. "You need to hear this," I said, and I told him what Ben had shared. He made a short, annoyed sound. "Do not stick your nose in their business, Dana," he said. "They are doing fine without you stirring things up." I pushed harder. I said the words investigation and shady deals. He cut me off. "Enough. Focus on your own life." He ended the call. I sat with the phone in my hand, heat rising behind my eyes. Dad's trust in Ryan and Sabrina felt blind. But this was not new. He had always chosen Ryan's dreams and told me I was being difficult when I asked too many questions. I called Mom next, hoping for even a small crack in the wall. "Please just listen," I said. I laid out the red flags slowly and clearly. She sighed, gentle but unmoving. "Let it go, Dana," she said. "They are happy. Do not ruin it." I stared at the wall of my apartment. A line formed inside me, neat and sharp. If they would not listen, I had to find the truth on my own. I reached out to old contacts. A former client from my engineering work had moved into real estate law. I emailed her and asked if she had heard of Sabrina's agency. She replied fast. Yes, she knew the name. The firm had multiple complaints tied to fraudulent mortgages and odd paperwork that did not match. Another person I knew, a surveyor I had partnered with on a land project, said he had caught whispers at a title company about Sabrina pushing deals that did not smell right. All of it tightened a knot in my stomach. I was not just suspicious anymore. I was sure there was something big under the surface. I kept it to myself. I opened a folder on my laptop and started saving notes, dates, and names. I checked the public records that anyone can search if you have the patience. I found properties with Sabrina's name tied to them, sales that closed high and fast, then had buyers filing disputes a few months later. It was not enough to prove a crime, but it painted a picture that looked wrong. I texted Ben again, asked him to ping me if he heard anything new. He said he would keep an ear out. In the meantime, I built a routine that held me steady. I went to yoga, I had simple dinners with Grace. The city started to feel like a place where I could start my own life, one step at a time. But the weight from my family's house did not leave. It sat in the corner like another sealed box I had not opened yet. I kept asking myself the same question. Was Ryan part of this? Or was he just a piece Sabrina moved around the board? He had always believed in the biggest promise in the room. Maybe she knew that and used it. Maybe she saw how my parents wanted to be dazzled and gave them exactly what they were hungry to hear. 2 weeks later, I was waiting on coffee at a quiet neighborhood cafe when I heard my name. I turned and saw Linda Price, a family friend I had known since I was small. She had gray hair pulled back and kind eyes that noticed everything. "Dana, look at you," she said, waving me over. We talked about work and the weather and my new apartment. Then I mentioned Sabrina and Linda's face changed. "Sabrina Hayes?" she asked, lowering her voice. "I knew her years ago. She worked for a real estate outfit in Lincoln that cut corners like it was a sport. They got sued, people said signatures were forged, property values were pumped up, and the difference ended up in the wrong pockets. Sabrina was in deep, but she slipped out before the worst of it landed." The knot in my chest tightened into something solid. This was not a rumor anymore. This fit what Ben had said and what the records hinted at. I finished my coffee fast and drove straight to my parents' place. My hands were tight on the steering wheel the whole way. Ryan was in the driveway, pulling grocery bags from the trunk and wearing that smug expression I knew too well. "We need to talk," I said. I pulled out my phone and showed him Ben's email. Plain sentences, simple dates, clear warnings. "She is not who you think. The firm is under a cloud for fake appraisals and missing client money. Linda knew her back in Lincoln. There was a scam and Sabrina was inside it." Ryan's face hardened. He yanked the phone out of my hand, skimmed the message and shoved it back. "You are jealous," he said, sharp as a blade. "Sabrina is successful, and you cannot stand it. Stop making things up." I stared at him. "This is not about me," I said. "This is about your wife dragging our parents into something that can wreck them." He laughed short, bitter, like a door slamming. "Go play detective somewhere else, Dana." I walked inside. Mom stood at the stove stirring soup like it was any other day. "Mom," I said carefully, keeping my voice from shaking. "Linda knew Sabrina before. There was a company that scammed people. You need to look at anything Sabrina is doing with the house." Mom's spoon paused, but she did not meet my eyes. "Do not start trouble," she whispered. "Ryan is happy. That is what matters." Her words felt like a brick wall. She had always stepped away from conflict and left me standing in the middle of it alone. Back in my apartment, I called Ben with my jaw tight. "Linda confirmed it," I said. "Sabrina was with a crooked firm in Lincoln." Ben exhaled slowly. "I dug deeper after we spoke," he said. "Her name is on a mortgage document for your parents' place. Signed last month. It looks like a second lien tied to a shell company. If it is what I think, they could lose everything." I held the phone and did not speak for a moment. The house I had fed for years, the one I had kept standing with my own paycheck, was now a chip on Sabrina's table. "Send me the documents," I said. My hands shook after I hung up. I spent hours that night in public databases, the kind you have to click through patiently. The mortgage was there, numbers that made my throat go dry. It was a 6-figure loan against the house. Sabrina's signature sat next to my father's. I found another record. Money moved out of my parents' savings into an account linked to her agency. This was not just fraud in a headline. It was personal. She had used their trust and their names to fill her pockets. Every call I made to Dad, every warning I gave Mom, every time they told me to stop causing trouble. It all came back like a stack of receipts laid on the table and pushed back at me. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling of my little apartment. The weight of it all pressed down, years of carrying the house, years of being brushed aside. And for a minute I could not move. Then something clear settled inside me. I was not done. Sabrina might be quick and shiny, but she was not invisible. I started saving everything, every file, every email, every number that pointed to what she had done. This was not only about the house now. It was about the truth. It was about making sure she could not run fast enough to outrun what she had already said and signed. I plugged in my phone, set it on the table and took a long breath. The next time she slipped up, I would be ready. A week later, the phone rang just as I was finishing up a late report. The name on the screen made my stomach tighten. Mom. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something inside told me to pick up. Her voice was shaky, almost a whisper. Dana, there are people here, she said. They're asking for Sabrina. I froze. What do you mean, people? Before she could answer, I grabbed my keys and ran to the car. The drive to my parents' house was a blur. Red lights, street lamps, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my neck. When I pulled up, 2 men in dark jackets were standing in the driveway, badges catching the glow of the porch light. Dad was at the door, pale as the curtains behind him, and Ryan was pacing in the hallway, clutching his phone. One of the men turned toward me. "We're with the State Investigation Unit," he said, holding up a folder. "We need to speak with Sabrina Hayes. She's linked to a number of fraudulent real estate transactions, forged documents, stolen client funds, and misused loans." My brother's eyes went wide. He looked at Mom like a child caught doing something wrong. "She's lying," he shouted, voice cracking. "Mom, tell me she's lying." The officer didn't flinch. He explained that Sabrina's name appeared on several fake property deals, and a new loan tied to the house itself, the house I had helped keep standing for years. Mom's hand went to her chest. She shook her head but didn't speak. Dad stepped forward, his voice trembling. "She's not here right now," he said quietly. The investigators handed him a card. "We'll be back," one of them said before walking toward their car. As they pulled away, headlights flashed across the street. A black sport utility vehicle I recognized instantly. Sabrina. She parked across from the house, unaware I was already outside. I walked straight toward her, my phone recording in my pocket. "Sabrina," I called, keeping my voice steady even though my pulse was racing. She turned sharply, her face pale under the streetlight. "What's this about, Dana?" she snapped. I took a step closer. "I know about the mortgage. I know about the savings account. You've been draining my family dry. Just tell the truth." Her eyes flicked toward the house, then back to me. For a moment I thought she might lie again. But instead she smiled, that same confident, polished smile she used at dinner, and said, "Fine. You want the truth? I took the money. The house was collateral for a deal. Your dad signed off. Ryan didn't have a clue." I pressed my hand over my pocket, making sure my phone was still recording. "You used them," I said. She shrugged, cold and unapologetic. "They trusted me. That's on them." Before I could speak again, she jumped into her car, slammed the door, and sped away, tires screeching against the asphalt. I stood there under the streetlight, her words still echoing in my ears. She'd said it herself. Every lie, every dollar, and now I had proof. Inside, the house felt smaller than ever. Ryan sat on the couch, head in his hands, mumbling to himself. How could she do this? His voice was hollow. Then he looked up at me, eyes wide and wet. "You knew something was off. Why didn't you stop her?" I stared at him, stunned. "I tried, Ryan," I said. "I called, I warned, I begged you all to listen. You called me jealous." He had no answer. He just looked away. Mom stood in the corner, clutching her sweater like it could hold her together. Dad sank into a chair, covering his face with his hands. The investigators' papers were still spread across the table. Lines, numbers, and signatures I had already seen online. I should have felt satisfaction. I'd been right. I'd seen it coming. But all I felt was tired, so tired that my bones ached. Later that night, my phone rang again. Dad's voice broke through the silence. "Dana," he said, his tone small, almost childlike. "We're in trouble. The bank's calling in the loan. We might lose the house. Can you come back? Please, we need you." I closed my eyes. I could still hear his voice from that dinner. "You can take the guest room or move out." I remembered every bill I paid, every repair I made, every time they told me I wasn't essential. "No, Dad," I said finally, my voice calm but firm. "I gave everything for that house. You chose Ryan and Sabrina over me. You'll have to handle this yourselves." He started to plead, but I hung up. And for the first time in years, I felt something that almost scared me, freedom. The next morning, I sat on my couch with a cup of coffee, the recording playing softly on my phone. Sabrina's voice, cool and sharp, filled the room. "Fine. I took the money. They trusted me. That's on them." I saved the file, labeled it neatly, and sent a copy to the investigator's email address printed on their card. It wouldn't fix what was broken, but it was something. Proof. Ryan, Mom, and Dad would have to face the consequences on their own now. Their debts, their mistakes, their silence. All of it was theirs to carry. I had carried them long enough. The morning after sending the recording, I drove to my parents' house to see what was left. The yard was quiet, the porch light still burning from the night before. When I stepped inside, the air felt heavier, thick with worry and dust. Papers covered the dining table. Bank notices, loan agreements, foreclosure warnings. Dad sat slumped in his chair, a man who finally realized what he'd done too late. He handed me a folder from the bank without a word. The numbers were brutal. A second mortgage had been taken out on the house, $250,000, signed by both Dad and Sabrina. Not a single payment had been made. Their savings, nearly $200,000 meant for retirement, was gone, transferred straight into an account linked to her firm. I flipped through the pages slowly, my engineering mind piecing together the damage. This house, the one I'd kept alive with my own paychecks, was now a sinking ship, and they were already underwater. Ryan sat on the couch, his eyes red. "Dana, you've got to help us," he said, his voice cracking. "The bank's coming for everything. We're broke." I stared at him, and for a moment I saw flashes of every dinner, every sarcastic grin, every time he told me I wasn't needed. "Help you?" I repeated. "You told me I wasn't essential, remember? You and Dad both told me to get out. Now you want me to bail you out again?" He flinched but still tried to hold my gaze. "We're family. You can't just walk away." I shook my head. "You made your choice, Ryan. I'm done carrying everyone." Dad stood by the window, his shoulders hunched. "I messed up, Dana," he said quietly. "I trusted her. I thought she and Ryan knew what they were doing. I thought they were building something." I swallowed hard. His words hit something deep in me, but it wasn't enough to move me. "You didn't just trust her, Dad," I said. "You chose her. You chose Ryan's dreams over my reality. You always have. I can't fix that." He looked at me with eyes that had aged 10 years in a single night, but I didn't soften. I'd given too much already. Then Mom came in from the kitchen, her face streaked with tears. "Dana, please," she said, reaching out for my hand. "We're going to lose everything, the house, the savings, it's all gone." Her touch made me hesitate, but the memory of her silence that night, the dinner when she stared at her plate while they pushed me out, came back sharp and clear. "You didn't listen," I said quietly. "I warned you about her. I begged you to look closer. You told me to let it go. Now you're asking me to save you?" Mom's face crumpled and she sobbed into her hands. For a second, guilt flickered through me. But it wasn't strong enough to erase the years of being invisible. I walked through the house, past every wall I had painted, every appliance I had bought. The windows I'd replaced with my own money gleamed faintly in the morning light, mocking me. Everything I'd done to keep this place alive was now tangled in Sabrina's fraud. The bank notices on the table said foreclosure could start within weeks if the loan wasn't paid. Ryan had no steady job, no backup plan, just excuses. Dad's pension barely covered utilities, and Mom's part-time work at the local store could only stretch so far. They weren't just facing debt, they were staring down ruin. And for the first time I realized something: I could fix this. But I shouldn't. Not because I didn't care, but because I didn't owe them that anymore. I turned toward the door, the sound of Mom's crying following me down the hall. I stopped for just a second and said, without turning around, "I hope you understand one day that love isn't the same as sacrifice." Then I walked out. Back at my apartment, I sat at my small table, staring at the file on my laptop, the recording, the bank documents, every email I'd saved. I sent everything to the investigators, attaching a note that said simply, "For evidence if needed." It wouldn't bring back the house or the money, but it would make sure the truth couldn't hide anymore. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the fridge. Outside, I could hear people laughing on the sidewalk. Life was still going on even as theirs fell apart. And I realized I wasn't drowning with them this time. They would have to face the fallout on their own. The next morning, sunlight spilled through my apartment window, landing across my desk. I sat there with my coffee, replaying the last few days in my head. The calls, the tears, the house, the betrayal. It all felt like something I'd watched happen to someone else. For years, that house had defined my life. It was the reason I stayed in Omaha instead of taking better jobs in other cities. It was the reason I worked late, skipped vacations, and told myself family came first. But sitting there now in my own place, I realized something simple but powerful. I didn't owe them my life anymore. I opened my laptop and stared at the folder labeled evidence. Inside were the documents, the recordings, and every detail of Sabrina's scheme. I had already sent copies to the investigators, but I kept them saved. Not for revenge but for closure. That afternoon, I decided to go for a walk. Downtown Omaha was busy, full of sounds. Music from a cafe, the buzz of traffic, people talking as they passed by. It was loud and alive, and for the first time in a long time I didn't feel small inside it. I stopped by the park and sat on a bench just breathing. I thought about how much of myself I had given away trying to hold my family together. I had paid their bills, fixed their home, and carried their worries, all while they looked right past me. I had been the invisible daughter, useful but never seen. When I left that night weeks ago, I thought I'd feel broken. Instead, I was finally learning what peace felt like. The days that followed slipped into a rhythm that was completely my own. I woke up early, cooked breakfast, and went to work. I poured myself into a new project designing a stormwater system for a community near the river. It wasn't glamorous work, but it mattered. And for once I felt proud, truly proud of what I was building. Grace Turner, my coworker and friend, became my anchor through it all. We met for yoga twice a week and dinner every Friday. She never asked about my family unless I brought it up. She just listened, laughed, and reminded me that life didn't have to revolve around pain. One night after class, we sat in a quiet corner of a small cafe. Grace looked at me over her cup of tea and said, "You know, you're different lately." "Different how?" I asked. She smiled. "Lighter. Like you're finally breathing for yourself." I thought about that for a long time. Maybe she was right. For so long, I had been living with a constant knot of tension in my chest. But since walking away, that knot had started to loosen. Still, sometimes the guilt tried to creep back in. I'd lie awake at night and hear echoes of my dad's voice. His plea for help, my mom's sobs, Ryan's disbelief. There were moments when I wanted to pick up the phone and call, just to make sure they were okay. But then I'd remember all the nights I spent fixing broken things while they dismissed me. I'd remember Mom saying, "Don't start trouble." I'd remember Dad's words, "It's decided." And I'd remind myself, I didn't leave out of cruelty. I left because I finally understood I was never supposed to fix them. About 2 months later, a letter came in the mail from the investigation office. It confirmed that Sabrina's confession and the evidence I'd shared had been filed as part of an active fraud case. She was being charged for financial crimes involving multiple clients and false property documents. Reading it, I didn't feel triumph. I just felt quiet. Peaceful, maybe. Justice didn't erase the hurt, but it was something steady to lean on. I folded the letter neatly and put it in a drawer. Then I poured myself a glass of wine and called Grace. "Guess what?" I said, smiling as she picked up. "They're charging Sabrina." Grace laughed. "About time. Are you okay?" "Yeah," I said softly. "Actually, I am." That night, I stood by my window watching the city lights blink below me. For the first time in years, my future felt wide open. No guilt, no pressure, no expectations, just space to live the way I wanted. I thought about the word family. For me, it no longer meant the people who shared my blood. It meant the people who saw me for who I was. And even if my circle was small, it finally felt right. I had spent most of my life trying to earn love. Now I was learning that I didn't have to earn peace. And peace, quiet, honest peace, was worth everything I had lost. About 6 months after Sabrina's confession, I heard through a mutual friend what had happened to my family. The house, the same one I'd paid for, fixed, and fought to save, had finally been foreclosed on. The bank gave them every chance to make payments, but the debt was too deep, the damage too big. When they missed the last deadline, the house was gone. Just like that. Dad and Mom moved into a small rental apartment on the edge of Omaha. It was nothing like the house they once been so proud of. Peeling paint, old carpet, one narrow hallway. The big backyard where we used to grill on summer nights was replaced by a tiny patch of dry grass behind the parking lot. Ryan was worse off. He'd lost his job after Sabrina's scandal hit the news. He was working part-time at a hardware store, just enough to scrape by. A friend told me he'd been calling people late at night, asking for loans, sounding desperate. Sabrina, from what I heard, had skipped town before the case reached court. The last anyone saw of her was on security footage at a gas station, filling up her car and heading west. Even with the evidence I'd provided, she managed to disappear. The law would find her eventually, but by then, she had already taken more than just their money. She took their pride, their stability, their trust. Mom started cleaning houses to help pay rent, something she never imagined doing in her 60s. Dad began driving for a delivery service, silent behind the wheel, spending his days dropping off packages for strangers. It broke my heart a little, knowing they were living that way. But I also knew I couldn't be the one to fix it. They had made their choice long before any of this happened. They'd chosen to believe Sabrina instead of me. Over the next few weeks, I got a few messages from Ryan, short texts asking for money or a place to stay. I didn't respond. Dad left voicemails too, his tone softer than I'd ever heard it. "Dana, please call us back. We're trying to make things right." But I couldn't pick up. Even Mom reached out once, writing me a handwritten letter that arrived in a plain white envelope. I remember staring at it for a long time before I opened it. Inside, her handwriting wobbled and uneven. "Dana, I'm sorry. You were right about everything. We should have listened. We lost more than money. We lost you. I hope someday you can forgive us." I folded the letter and set it on my counter. It stayed there for days, unopened again, as if I couldn't decide whether I wanted to keep it or throw it away. Sometimes I would look at it while making dinner and feel a pull in my chest. But then I'd remind myself of the girl who had sat at that dinner table months ago, the one who begged to be seen and was told she wasn't essential. Forgiveness might come someday, but I wasn't ready yet. I had spent years being the safety net for everyone else. I had been the one who fixed things while they ignored the leaks. This time I was saving myself instead. I told myself that self-respect wasn't selfish. It was survival. Still, the nights were quiet. Sometimes I caught myself wondering if they were okay, if Dad still drank his morning coffee at the window, or if Mom still hummed while she cooked. But I also knew that if I called, they'd try to pull me back in. And I couldn't go back to being the person they leaned on while pretending I didn't exist. One evening after yoga class, I walked home with Grace. The sun was setting, the sky painted pink and orange. She glanced at me and said, "You've been quiet." I smiled softly. "Just thinking about them." "Yeah," I admitted. "Sometimes I miss what I thought we had. But I don't miss how small I felt trying to keep it." Grace nodded. "It's okay to grieve it, you know, even if you're glad it's over." Her words stayed with me, because grief and relief can live in the same place. And that's what healing felt like, learning to hold both without losing yourself. That night, I went home and finally picked up Mom's letter again. I read it slowly this time, every line, every shaky word. When I finished, I didn't cry. I just folded it neatly and placed it in a drawer, next to Sabrina's confession file. Not as a reminder of pain, but as proof that I had survived it. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. I made a cup of coffee and stood by the window watching the city wake up. For the first time in years, I didn't feel trapped between duty and resentment. The storm had passed and I was still standing. 6 months later, life looked nothing like it had before. My apartment had finally started to feel like a home instead of a temporary stop. The walls were lined with a few framed photos from my trips with Grace, and the shelves were filled with books I actually had time to read now. On my desk sat a stack of blueprints, my latest project, a bridge design that had just earned me a promotion to lead engineer. The raise was nice, but what meant more was the respect. People saw me, heard me, valued my work, something my own family had never done. That evening, Grace came over with a bottle of red wine and 2 glasses. She dropped her bag on the couch and grinned. "To you, Dana," she said, raising her glass. "You're absolutely killing it." I laughed, feeling a kind of lightness I hadn't known in years. "I'm just trying to keep up," I said. "Please," she teased. "You're finally living." She was right. My life wasn't perfect, but it was mine, fully, completely mine. Yoga twice a week. Weekend dinners with Grace. Work that made me proud. And silence that wasn't heavy anymore. It was peaceful. Every so often, a thought about my family would pass through my mind. I heard from a neighbor that they were still renting that small apartment in the suburbs. Dad was still driving for deliveries. Mom cleaned a few houses during the week. Ryan was trying to rebuild, working part-time at a hardware store. They were surviving, just barely, but surviving all the same. I hadn't spoken to them since the last letter. Sometimes I caught myself reaching for the phone, wondering if maybe enough time had passed. But then I'd remember the years I spent bending myself to fit into their idea of family, and I'd set the phone back down. Forgiving them would come, maybe one day. But forgetting? No. Because forgetting would mean erasing the woman I had to become to stand on my own. One Sunday afternoon, I sat by the window with Grace, sunlight flooding the room. She looked around and smiled. "You've come so far," she said. "I guess I have," I replied softly. I thought about everything that had happened, the years of giving, the betrayal, the silence, the heartbreak. And somehow, out of all that pain, I had found something steady myself. Family, I realized, isn't just blood. It's the people who see you when others look away. It's the friend who shows up at your door with food when you're too tired to cook. It's the people who don't make you earn your worth. Grace had become that kind of family for me. And for the first time, that was enough. Later that evening, I sat down to write, something I hadn't done in a while. Not a letter to my parents, just a message to anyone who might hear my story someday. It's not easy to draw boundaries with the people you love. But sometimes it's the only way to save yourself. Walking away doesn't mean you stopped caring. It means you finally cared enough about yourself to stop drowning for people who refuse to swim. I paused, looking at those words on the screen, then smiled. To everyone else, it might have just been another story about a broken family and a con artist. But to me, it was the story of how I stopped living for other people and started choosing myself. I closed my laptop and looked out at the fading city lights, a quiet peace washing over me. "Thank you for following my story," I whispered, as if speaking to whoever might be listening somewhere far away. It's not easy standing up for yourself, especially when it hurts, but it's worth it. Then I added softly, "Have you ever had to set boundaries with your own family? What did it teach you?" Because sometimes the most powerful stories aren't about revenge or loss. They're about finally finding yourself when everyone else stopped looking. And that was the ending I never knew I needed. What was your favorite moment? Drop it in the comments below. Don't miss more thrilling stories like this. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload.